He had the correct documentation. He had a valid visa. He had been named the best referee on the African continent in 2025. He had spent 8 years climbing to the ranks of football officiating, Continental Youth Tournaments, senior qualifying matches, and eventually a CAF Champions League final, the first Somali official in history to reach that stage. He had been assessed, evaluated, and selected by FIFA from a complete global pool of referees as one of 52 officials trusted to manage matches at the 2026 World Cup. That selection was not honorary. It was a result of a career built match by match across a decade of work in a discipline that offers almost no margin for error and rewards almost nothing except accumulated competence. On June 6, 6 days before the opening match, Omar Abdulkader Hirsi boarded a flight to Miami. He carried his FIFA accreditation. He carried his diplomatic passport. He carried everything that should have been required. What followed lasted 11 hours. At Miami International Airport, Hirsi was directed to secondary inspection. The formal procedural step applied when border officials determined that further questioning is necessary. According to his own account of those 11 hours, the questioning focused substantially on Al-Shabaab, the militant group operating in parts of Somalia. Hirsi was born in Somalia in 1992. He had represented that country across a decade of officiating at the highest levels of African football. Somalia's connection to the questions asked of him at that airport began and ended with the passport in his hand. He presented his FIFA documentation. He answered the questions. He continued answering them for 11 hours. Then he was placed in a holding facility. Then he was placed on a flight back to Istanbul. He spoke afterward. He said he was very, very disappointed. He said he was simply a referee trying to live the biggest dream of his life, to come to the World Cup. He said he had the right papers and everything. He said none of it had been sufficient. Somalia is among the 39 countries subject to comprehensive U.S. travel restrictions. That classification was, in operational terms, the only reason that mattered. Customs and Border Protection described the outcome as a result of vetting concerns. No elaboration was provided. FIFA confirmed that Hirsi would not officiate at the 2026 tournament. Its statement noted that the organization is not involved in host country immigration determinations. It confirmed that the decision of who may enter the United States rests with the American government. It confirmed the outcome would not be altered. And in the days since, a question has circulated that no official sources answered. Why did FIFA not reassign Hirsi to fixtures in Canada or Mexico, where no travel restriction applied to him? He was Africa's Referee of the Year. He had officiated a continental final. He had been selected and confirmed for the tournament's officiating roster. The organizational infrastructure to relocate him to matches outside American jurisdiction existed. The decision to deploy it apparently was not made. The dignity Hirsi brought to his public response made the surrounding circumstances harder to look at directly. A man whose career achievement had been removed from him at an airport corridor said he remained in a positive frame of mind and intended to maintain his level ahead of future opportunities. He thanked the organizations that had supported him. He looked forward. The contrast between his composure and the conditions that produced it was not lost on anyone following the story. This happened on June 9, 2026, the day before the World Cup began. The Hirsi story is not an isolated incident that arrived without context. It is the most precise single expression of a gap that has been widening throughout this tournament's preparation. The gap between what the World Cup declares about its own universality and what the conditions surrounding this edition have actually delivered. To understand it fully, it has to be placed alongside the other stories that broke on the same day, and alongside the specific contrast that the co-hosting structure of this tournament has made impossible to ignore. Start with Canada. Because Canada's experience of hosting this tournament and the experience of the world arriving into Canada for it has been substantively different from what has unfolded on the American side of the border, and that difference is not incidental. Toronto is home to more than 200 documented nationalities. That figure is not promotional language. It is a demographic fact about one of the most genuinely diverse urban populations on the planet. Football communities from virtually every nation competing in this tournament have established roots in the city. Bosnian supporters who have followed their national team across decades. Italian communities with memories stretching back to 1994. Senegalese families who settled in Canada because Canada's immigration framework permitted them to. Iranian diaspora who could not attend their team's matches in Los Angeles, but who could attend them in Toronto. Moroccan communities whose children are growing up in the city, now hosting the sport their parents brought with them. Canada's Soccer House opened on June 11th in both Toronto and North Vancouver. Free entry. No ticket required. Doors open from the tournament's first match so that the communities of those cities could watch together at no cost, in a space built around the idea of collective belonging. The Canada Soccer Director of Community and Sport Inclusion described it plainly. The purpose was belonging, celebration, and connection through football. She said everyone was welcome. In Toronto, that phrase carries a specific operational weight. It describes a city whose actual demographic composition makes the welcome structurally real rather than aspirationally stated. The Fan Festival in Toronto runs at Fort York National Historic Site and the Bentway, a public space developed beneath the city's elevated motorway that has been reimagined as a venue of genuine cultural ambition. Free, open to the public, running from June 10th to July 19th for the full duration of the tournament. The theme chosen for Toronto's World Cup identity was 4 words: the world and city. That is not a tagline constructed for a marketing brief. It is a factual description of what Toronto is. The transport arrangements around host venues were communicated clearly, in advance, and with practical specificity. The immigration guidance issued through official Canadian government channels was direct and warm. Documents required, timelines, advice to apply early, and a clear closing statement. Canada is excited to be hosting. You are welcome here. 2 words. 11 letters. The most consequential phrase any host can direct at a visitor, and the degree to which those 2 words could be stated with credibility, and the degree to which the person receiving them could believe they were true, became the defining difference between the experience of attending this World Cup in Canada and attending it in the United States. Vancouver adds its own specific texture. BC Place sits within one of the most visually arresting urban settings in world sport, mountains directly behind a downtown skyline. The Pacific close enough to feel a compact ground holding just over 54,000 people. Both of Canada's Vancouver fixtures will be full. The contained capacity of that venue produces an atmospheric density that larger stadiums routinely fail to achieve. When 54,000 committed supporters occupy a space designed for that number rather than being distributed across 90,000 seats, the sound accumulates differently. For the Canadian players, who arrive on the back of 7 consecutive unbeaten matches in the pre-tournament period, Jonathan David leading the attack, Alphonso Davies restored from his ACL rehabilitation, Ismail Cohn described by the coaching staff as capable of changing matches. The home environment in Vancouver will be unlike anything their international careers have previously generated. Mexico's contribution to this tournament carries a different character and reaches deeper than the football itself. The most significant thing Mexico did in the preparation for 2026 was not related to stadium infrastructure or broadcasting logistics. It was what happened at the border, when the conditions surrounding Iran's participation in the United States became unmanageable through conventional planning. When a qualified nation found itself unable to secure safe overnight accommodation on American soil, unable to trust the visa process for its own federation officials, navigating an active military conflict with the primary host country that no sporting calendar had ever been designed to accommodate, Mexico made a decision. The governor of Baja California opened Tijuana. She said her state was prepared to receive the Iranian national team and that it would treat them as if they were at home. Mexico's president confirmed the arrangement publicly and said her country maintains diplomatic relations with all nations. The Iranian ambassador quoted a Persian proverb about friendship that reveals itself not in easy times but in difficult ones. He was speaking about Mexico when he said it. Iran's players arrived in Tijuana on June 7th. Supporters were waiting outside the training complex. They crossed the border on match days, competed, and returned south. The arrangement had no precedent in World Cup history and no protocol designed to govern it. It functioned because Mexico decided it would. Then, on June 9th, the same day Hersey's story became public, the Iranian Football Federation issued a statement claiming that FIFA had revoked its entire supporter ticket allocation for all 3 of its group stage matches in the United States. The standard entitlement for each participating federation is 8% of venue capacity per match. For Iran, competing in a stadium approaching 70,000 capacity in New Jersey against New Zealand and Belgium, and then in Seattle against Egypt, that figure represented several thousand tickets per fixture. Those tickets are the pathway through which a nation's most committed supporters, diaspora members already residing in the host country, longtime followers who have invested years in following their team, access to matches their national team has qualified to play. The Federation stated that allocation had been withdrawn entirely, not reduced, not partially reallocated, removed. The Federation said it was unable to offer a single ticket to supporters for any of its 3 matches. FIFA did not immediately issue a public statement confirming or denying the claim. The same organization that stated it was not involved in host country immigration processes. The same body that watched its own selected referee spend 11 hours in an airport corridor before being returned to Istanbul, now face an allegation that it stripped a qualified nation of its supporter ticket rights in the days before their first match. Iran's officials could not obtain visas to enter the United States. The team was sleeping in another country, and the supporters who had followed the team through years of commitment, who had applied through official channels, who had organized their lives around attending these fixtures, had no tickets. Ian Wright posted a video. It was shared hundreds of thousands of times within hours. He listed the accumulation. Fans refused, players refused, officials refused, journalists refused, referees refused. He said he was laughing, but acknowledged clearly that none of it was funny. He asked whether this was how a host nation conducts itself at the world's greatest sporting event. He asked whether this reflected what football is supposed to mean. And then he said something that is worth carrying with you beyond this moment. He said he felt most for the American football supporters, the people in the United States who had been waiting for this, who had wanted their country to show the world what it looks like to host a game, who deserved to feel proud of how this was done. How embarrassed they must be. That was not directed at them in criticism. It was said on their behalf, by someone who understood that the gap between what this tournament was supposed to represent and what it had produced was being felt most acutely by the Americans who loved the sport and had invested everything in the hope that this moment would be worthy of it. Now set the full picture side by side. The Zocalo in Mexico City opened its doors free for 39 days because Mexico City understood that a World Cup belongs in the streets of the city hosting it, not behind a commercial perimeter. The opening ceremony at the Azteca brought Shakira and Burna Boy and tens of thousands of people who needed no institutional persuasion to love football. They already did. Toronto's festival opened at a National Historic Site because Canada understood that welcoming the world means giving it somewhere to gather that reflects the actual character of the place. Vancouver's compact stadium will be full and loud and alive in a way that architectural scale alone cannot produce. Meanwhile, the fan festival planned for Liberty State Park in New Jersey, the state hosting the final, was canceled. Seattle's fan campus was reduced from 74 planned acres to 4 dispersed smaller sites. Dallas carried over 350,000 unsold tickets when the city council last received an update. An England warm-up in Tampa drew 13,000 people to a 69,000-seat venue. And Omar Hersey spent 11 hours at an airport being questioned about a terrorist organization before being placed on a flight. Not to Canada, not to Mexico, but home to Istanbul. Consider what that moment means beyond Hersey himself. For the young Somali referees who watch and become the first official from their country to reach a continental final, who followed the trajectory of his career and understood what his World Cup selection represented. He was not simply an accomplished official. He was evidence that the path was open, that dedication and craft and consistency over years could carry a Somali referee to the biggest stage in the sport. And then the path was closed at an immigration desk after 11 hours of questioning, for reasons that remain undisclosed, and he went home. What do those referees understand about the World Cup now that they did not understand before June 9th? The tournaments that have lodged most permanently in collective memory are not remembered only for the football. France in 1998, Japan and South Korea in 2002, South Africa in 2010. What made those editions feel like genuine celebrations of the game was the sense that the invitation extended to the world was real, that when those tournaments said everyone was welcome, the statement carried operational weight, that the person receiving could arrive at a border and find it to be true. Canada means it in 2026. Toronto means it. Vancouver means it. Mexico means it, and demonstrated that meaning at a border in a way that required no promotional campaign to communicate. The football has begun. The matches are real, and they will produce the moments that tournaments at the scale reliably produce. Performances, results, passages of play that outlast the institutional circumstances surrounding them. In Toronto and Vancouver and Mexico City and Monterrey, the experience of being at this World Cup is what was always supposed to be. Genuinely warm, practically accessible, and animated by a specific joy available only when the game is played at its highest level in cities that prepare for the world with the full intention of actually receiving it. But Omar Hirsi is in Istanbul. Iran supporters have no tickets. The fan festival for the tournament's final is canceled. And the American football supporters who wanted their country to show the world how the game should be hosted are still waiting for an answer to that question that they can be proud of. Every few hours, another story. That was Ian Wright's phrase. It was the most accurate summary of this build-up that anyone offered. And the question it leaves behind as the matches fill the next 6 weeks is this. For the young referee in Mogadishu or Hargeisa or Kismayo, watching Hirsi's story and reconsidering what the World Cup actually means. What would it take, and how many editions would it take for the answer they reached to be the right one?